I like to play cards on the African savannah, but I had to quit. There were way too many cheetahs. Boom! You have been waiting to get back to chapter 2, and here we are. Man, I'm going to tell you, it's a good one. It's called The Law of Club and Fang. So, get ready. Lesson 8 was actually the Socratic seminar that we did. That is why there is no video for Lesson 8, because we had our debate in class. But what we did is we engaged in a scholarly discussion about whether Jack London should be considered a nature faker based on his portrayal of Buck in Chapter 1 of The Call of the Wild. Today we're doing something a little different. Today we will begin reading and discussing and defining words in context in Chapter 2 of Call of the Wild. We're going to read together the text and gather evidence from incidents or events that happen that reveal aspects of Buck's and his owner's characters. Okay, so we're going to look at these things that happen in the story today and go, how is Buck changing? What is Buck like now? The materials you will need for today are Call of the Wild, pages 14 and 15, or 14 through 19. 14 through 19. It's about half of the second chapter. And we're also going to need our blue notebook, page 31. We're going to actually skip over some pages in our blue notebook. We'll come back to them. So don't worry if you see some blank pages. That's okay. Page 31 is what you need. And our vocabulary chart. We are going to go back to the vocabulary chart with some new words. All right, go ahead and open your books to page 14, or the beginning of chapter 2. We're going to start with the very first line of this, and we're going to end on paragraph 4, at the end of paragraph 4, where it says, bitter and deathless hatred. Something really interesting might happen here. By the way, this is set in a town called Dyea. I believe it's pronounced Dyea, and you'll see it here in the first line. This is a very interesting town, and I'll try to put a link to a YouTube video in the playlist here so you can learn about that town further. It's a very interesting town. But let's go ahead and start reading. The Law of Club and Fang. Buck's first day on the Dyea beach was like a nightmare. Every hour was filled with shock and surprise. He had been suddenly jerked from the heart of civilization and flung into the heart of things primordial. No lazy, sun-kissed life was this, with nothing to do but loaf and be bored. Here was neither peace, nor rest, nor a moment's safety. All was confusion and action, and every moment life and limb were in peril. There was an imperative need to be constantly alert, for these dogs and men were not town dogs and men. They were savages, all of them, who knew no law but the law of club and fang. He had never seen dogs fight as these wolfish creatures fought, and this first experience taught him an unforgettable lesson. It is true, it was a vicarious experience, else he would not have lived to profit by it. Curly was the victim. They were camped near the log store, where she, in her friendly way, made advances to a husky dog, the size of a full-grown wolf, though not half so large as she. There was no warning, only a leap like a flash, a metallic clip of teeth, a leap out equally swift, and Curly's face was ripped open from eye to jaw. It was the wolf manner of fighting, to strike and leap away. But there was more to it than this. 30 or 40 huskies ran to the spot and surrounded the combatants in an intent and silent circle. Buck did not comprehend that silent intentness, nor the eager way in which they were licking their chops. Curly rushed her antagonist, who struck again and leaped aside. He met her next rush with his chest in a peculiar fashion that tumbled her off her feet. She never regained them. This was what the onlooking huskies had waited for. They closed in upon her, snarling and yelping, and she was buried, screaming with agony, beneath the bristling mass of bodies. So sudden was it, and so unexpected, that Buck was taken aback. He saw Spitz run out his scarlet tongue in a way he had of laughing. And he saw Francois, swinging an axe, spring into the mess of dogs. 3 men with clubs were helping him to scatter them. It did not take long. 2 minutes from the time Curly went down, the last of her assailants were clubbed off, but she lay there limp and lifeless in the bloody, trampled snow, almost literally torn to pieces. The swart half-breed standing over her and cursing horribly. The scene often came back to Buck to trouble him in his sleep. So that was the way. No fair play. Once down, that was the end of you. Well, he would see to it that he never went down. Spitz ran out his tongue and laughed again. And from that moment, Buck hated him with a bitter and deathless hatred. That is a pretty intense section of text, and we're going to look at the word choice here because Jack London is being very intentional with the words he chooses to set up this scene. Let's read about his description of the town of Dyea. We're going to read back here on the page, on the slide here. I'm going to read this out loud, and we're going to try to find out what the meaning of the words primordial and savages are. Okay. Buck's first day on the Dyea beach. This is wrongly typed in. Let's try again. Buck's first day on the Dyea beach was like a nightmare. Every hour was filled with shock and surprise. He had been suddenly jerked from the heart of civilization and flung into the heart of things primordial. No lazy, sun-kissed life was this, with nothing to do but loaf and be bored. Here was neither peace, nor rest, nor a moment's safety. All was confusion and action, and every moment life and limb were in peril. There was an imperative need to be constantly alert, for these dogs and men were not town dogs and men. They were savages, all of them, who knew no law but the law of club and fang. Okay, I'd like us to look at some context clues here. This sentence, he had been suddenly jerked, that's right here. He had been suddenly jerked from the heart of civilization and flung into the heart of things primordial. Okay, we have this repeated phrase, heart of civilization, and then heart of things primordial. There's a contrast set up here. Like on one hand you have this, on the other hand you have this. On one hand is civilization, on the other hand is things primordial. So that should give us a clue about what this word means. Let's also look at this context here for this bottom one. Starting here. They were savages, all of them, who, so we get an example of what savages are, who knew no law but the law of club and fang. Okay. So we get the word and then we kind of get a definition of the word or a further description of these people. Let's look at the word primordial here. There's a prefix. What's a prefix? Prefix is the beginning of a word, okay? Whoops, and it's right. Let me go back to my other, back to my other one. Pre, okay? Or prim. Think about prime numbers. We actually have a word in our chart already that starts with the same prefix, and it's the word primitive. Primitive is already in our chart, and it has the same prefix. This prefix tells us something about primary, okay? Primary, primitive. It's about first things, okay? First things. So we'll look at what this word means, and then savages, look up what this word means. So I'd like you guys to go ahead and fill in your vocabulary chart for these two words. You're going to pause the video here, find out the definitions in your own words. Don't just copy down the Google definition. look up the definition and see how it fits with the context of this passage right here. And then I want you to write that definition down. After you do that, get some synonyms, words that are similar, words that are opposite, and then finally what I want you to do is draw a picture or come up with a sentence that you can use for that. Okay? Go ahead and pause the video and get that done. Okay, now that you have a better understanding of what primordial and savages mean, this town of Dyea, just being described as a place where primordial and savage things happen, how does this relate to what happened to Curly? Should be pretty obvious by now. Curly was treated in a way that was primordial, like without law, almost like the beginning of time, just the chaos and chaos and chaos going on at the beginning of time, and how savagely she was treated. It's a really shocking moment in the story, and Jack London set it up by describing this town, by setting up this town as a place that was very dangerous, and he used these words. So it's important to note, authors are really intentional about the words they choose, and you should be too. When you're writing an essay, you should really think about which words are the best, because they do effectively communicate exactly what you want to communicate if you're careful. Question I want you to think about for a minute. What is meant by the law of club and fang? If you want to pause the video and just discuss with somebody near you, why do you think this chapter is called the law of club and fang? Again, pause the video, come back when you're done with that conversation. All right, so now that you have a better understanding of what these words mean, let's reread paragraph 4, starting with, so sudden was it and so unexpected that Buck was taken aback. We're going to look at our incident chart on page 31, blue folder page 31, okay? Get that ready. Okay, so we're on page 31 of our blue notebook, and we also have page 15 open on the 4th paragraph. I want you to reread the 4th paragraph of this, and I want you to visit these questions. What you're going to do is summarize the incident that happens right here. Just summarize, just the facts, what happened to who, and how. And finally, what does Buck's reaction reveal about his character and the wild right here? So, looking at the promises Buck makes to himself at the end of that paragraph, looking at his reaction, he could have reacted a lot of different ways. He could have run away. He could have run to defend her. He didn't do either of those things. He could have gone to get help. He didn't do that. What do you think this says about his character and the wild? What is he starting to recognize and think about? What's he starting to realize about his setting? So go back and read paragraph 4 and answer these 2 questions in your blue notebook, or these 2 boxes. Fill up these 2 boxes in your blue notebook. Pause the video and move on when you're done. Okay, we're going to continue reading now on page 15 near the bottom. It's the last paragraph that says, before he had recovered. Follow along with me. We're going to read to page 19. You see there on the slide where we will stop. Before he had recovered from the shock caused by the tragic passing of Curly, he received another shock. Francois fastened upon him an arrangement of straps and buckles. It was a harness, such as he had seen the grooms put on the horses at home. And as he had seen the horses work, so he was set to work, hauling Francois on a sled to the forest that fringed the valley, and returning with a load of firewood. Though his dignity was sorely hurt by thus being made a draft animal, he was too wise to rebel. He buckled down with a will and did his best, though it was all new and strange. Francois was stern, demanding instant obedience, and by virtue of his whip receiving instant obedience, while Dave, who was an experienced wheeler, nipped at Buck's hindquarters whenever he was in error. Spitz was the leader, likewise experienced, and while he could not always get at Buck, he growled sharp reproof now and again, or cunningly threw his weight in the traces to jerk Buck into the way he should go. Buck learned easily, and under the combined tuition of his two mates and Francois made remarkable progress. Ere they returned to camp, he knew enough to stop at "Ho!" and to go ahead at "Mush!" to swing wide on the bends, and to keep clear of the wheeler when the loaded sledge shot downhill at their heels. "Très ver, good dogs," Francois told Perrault. "Dat buck, him pull like hell. I teach him quick as anything." By afternoon, Perrault, who was in a hurry to be on the trail with his dispatches, returned with two more dogs. Billy and Joe, he called them, two brothers, and true huskies both. Sons of the one mother though they were as different as day and night. Billy's one fault was his excessive good nature, while Joe was the very opposite, sour and introspective, with a perpetual snarl and a malignant eye. Buck received them both in comradely fashion. Dave ignored them, while Spitz proceeded to thrash first one, then the other. Billy wagged his tail appeasingly, turned to run when he saw that appeasement was to no avail, and cried, still appeasingly, when Spitz's sharp teeth scored his flank. But no matter how Spitz circled, Joe whirled around on his heels to face him, mane bristling, ears laid back, lips writhing and snarling, jaws clipping together as fast as he could snap, and eyes diabolically gleaming, the incarnation of belligerent fear. So terrible was his appearance that Spitz was forced to forego disciplining him. But to cover his own discomfiture, he turned upon the inoffensive and wailing Billy and drove him to the confines of the camp. By evening, Perrault secured another dog, an old husky, long and lean and gaunt, with a battle-scarred face and a single eye, which flashed a warning of prowess that commanded respect. He was called Solex, which means angry one. Like Dave, he asked nothing, gave nothing, expected nothing, and when he marched slowly and deliberately into their midst, even Spitz left him alone. He had one peculiarity which Buck was unlucky enough to discover. He did not like to be approached on his blind side. Of this offense Buck was unwittingly guilty, and the first knowledge he had of his indiscretion was when Solex whirled upon him and slashed his shoulder to the bone for 3 inches up and down. Forever after, Buck avoided his blind side, and to the last of their comradeship had no more trouble. His only apparent ambition, like Dave's, was to be left alone, though as Buck was afterward to learn, each of them possessed one other and even more vital ambition. That night, Buck faced the great problem of sleeping. The tent, illuminated by a candle, glowed warmly in the midst of the white plain. And when he, as a matter of course, entered it, both Perrault and Francois bombarded him with curses and cooking utensils, till he recovered from his consternation and fled ignominiously into the outer cold. A chill wind was blowing that nipped him sharply and bit with especial venom into his wounded shoulder. He lay down on the snow and attempted to sleep, but the frost soon drove him shivering to his feet. Miserable and disconsolate, he wandered about among the many tents, only to find that one place was as cold as another. Here and there savage dogs rushed upon him, but he bristled his neck hair and snarled, for he was learning fast, and they let him go his way unmolested. That means unbothered, okay? Finally, an idea came to him. He would return to see how his own teammates were making out. To his astonishment, they had disappeared. Again, he wandered about through the great camp looking for them, and again he returned. Were they in the tent? No, that could not be, else he would not have been driven out. Then where could they possibly be? With drooping tail and shivering body, very forlorn indeed, he was aimlessly circled the tent. Suddenly, the snow gave way beneath his forelegs, and he sank down. Something wriggled under his feet. He sprang back, bristling and snarling, fearful of the unseen and unknown. But a friendly little yelp reassured him, and he went back to investigate. A whiff of warm air ascended to his nostrils, and there, curled up under the snow in a snug ball, lay Billy. He whined placatingly, squirmed and wiggled to show his good will and intentions, and even ventured, as a bribe for peace, to lick Buck's face with his warm, wet tongue. Another lesson. So that was the way they did it, eh? Buck confidently selected a spot, and with much fuss and waste of effort, proceeded to dig a hole for himself. In a trice, the heat from his body filled the confined space, and he was asleep. The day had been long and arduous, and he slept soundly and comfortably, though he growled and barked and wrestled with bad dreams. Nor did he open his eyes till roused by the noises of the waking camp. At first he did not know where he was. It had snowed during the night, and he was completely buried. The snow walls pressed him on every side, and a great surge of fear swept through him, the fear of the wild thing for the trap. It was a token that he was harking back through his own life to the lives of his forebearers. For he was a civilized dog, an unduly civilized dog, and of his own experience knew no trap, and so could not for himself fear it. The muscles of his whole body contracted spasmodically and instinctively. The hair on the back of his neck and shoulders stood on end, and with a ferocious snarl he bounded straight up into the blinding day, the snow flying about him in a flashing cloud. Ere he landed on his feet, he saw the white camp spread out before him, and knew where he was, and remembered all that had passed from the time he went for a stroll with Manuel to the hole he had dug for himself the night before. A shout from Francois hailed his appearance. "What I say?" the dog driver cried to Perrault. "Dat buck for sure learn quick as anything." Perrault nodded gravely. As courier for the Canadian government, bearing important dispatches, he was anxious to secure the best dogs, and he was particularly gladdened by the possession of Buck. Okay, team, so we finished that section of the chapter 2. Now we're going to discuss the text with someone around you, or if you're just ready to think about it and do it on your own, you can do that as well. But we're going to go back to page 31 in our blue folder. We're going to record one incident which reveals Buck's character. So that would be this second. You just summarize the incident and then write what that reveals about his character. And record one incident which reveals aspects of the character of Buck's owners, Francois and Perrault. Okay, so Francois and Perrault are going to be down here. Not that far down, more like, in the box. And then summarize the incident, and then what can we learn about the character from this? Go ahead and fill that in on page 31. Go back to the chapter and reread any sections, and then we'll move on to the next slide. All right, now we come to something here that is more for you to think about, but I do want you to think about it. I think it's important. There are really two incidents, maybe more in this chapter so far, that show that Buck is very intelligent, okay? And one of the incidents is him learning how to be a sled dog, okay, learning how to be, the rules, okay. The other incident is him figuring out how to go to sleep for the night in a brand new environment. So look at this question here. How does this incident demonstrate his ability to reflect and reason? And also, how does this incident demonstrate his capacity for emotion? Okay, I'd really just like you to think about that. If you want to scribble some notes down on page 31, just a little here and there. I'm not looking for a paragraph. I'm not looking for, anything elaborate, just a couple sentences. How do these events show him growing more intelligent, or how do they show his intelligence, and what do they show us about his emotions? Go ahead and do that, and then move on to the next slide when you're done. All right, very good. In this lesson, you continued reading and discussing chapter 2 of Call of the Wild. You also gathered text evidence and analyzed what specific incidents in the text revealed about Buck and his owners. You guys are amazing. Keep it up, and you'll move on to the next lesson when you're ready.